Welcome back.
Poetry is traditionally seen as a sensitive thing, an art practiced in scholar studies or during contemplation of nature. But many young people want their poetry, like their music, livelier than that.
Some modern poetry is closer to rap music than it is to ancient poets meditatively or drunkenly staring at the moon. Welcome to the world of the Poetry Slam and Australian Poetry Slam champion, Luka Lesson.
I've seen a lot of life. I've seen a lot of sights, a lot of lies, a lot of lows, a lot of highs.
Lesson was a name that I took when I started writing hip-hop, because I was doing a lot of teaching in schools, teaching young people how to rap and how to write poetry. And so Lesson came from that. And then I moved to Melbourne and started performing more as a poet, but I didn't want to use my hip-hop name as a poet, so I started just saying Luka. And then people who were fans of my poetry or liked my poetry didn't know when I was performing hip-hop because they didn't know who Lesson was. And people who were fans of my hip-hop didn't know who Luka was, so I decided to put the names together and made Luka Lesson, so now.
Do you know how war goes? Feeding on the lost souls.
Before he became Luka Lesson, hip-hop artist and performance poet, he was Luke Haralompu. In 2011, Luke won the Australia Poetry Slam competition. Poetry slams, which originated in Chicago in 1984, allow members of the audience, usually 5 of them, to take part in scoring the performances. Those audience members are chosen by a host. Over the years, poetry slams have spread to countries such as Germany, Canada, and the United Kingdom. Australia had its first in 2007.
A poetry event, you can just get up and perform, but a slam puts pressure on you to be the best you can possibly be. So I really love that. The prize was pretty amazing. I got to perform in Beijing and in the Ubud Writers Festival in Bali. So while we picket signs for our rights and try and
As part of the Hong Kong International Young Readers Festival in March, the Australian Consulate General invited Luka Lesson to deliver sharing sessions and poetry workshops to students in Hong Kong.
It helps me in that I understand the enjoyment behind poems more, I guess, and I would probably try to write some poems, and if I do have like a written assignment or something, I would try to use poems to express what I feel.
Workshop will definitely help me with my writing a little bit. I think that now I know another outlet to express my feelings. So now I know that poetry isn't just limited to this rhyming scheme or anything like that, but that it's really open to anyone's interpretation, and you can express poetry in any way you feel.
I've heard voices in the moon, seen faces in the waves.
Apart from giving talks and sharing his poetry skills in workshops, Luka is also actively involved in what he sees as social responsibilities.
17, only 17.
In 2010, he set up the Centre for Poetics and Justice to conduct workshops for Indigenous, African and refugee communities in Australia.
If you were 17 and in need of a dream...
My experience of growing up in Australia, I've definitely been a victim, or I've definitely experienced racism. I also studied Indigenous studies and have taught Indigenous studies at Monash University, so I have been able to observe Australia and experience Australia in a way that unfortunately most people don't get to, where they're not educated about the colonial history of Australia. And so it's been important to me to be able to work with all different types of people from all backgrounds, whether they are Anglo-Saxon Australian or Aboriginal Australian or migrant Australian like my family is, to be able to learn from each other by listening to each other's poetry or listening to each other's voices and stories about the true history and experience of Australia, rather than what sometimes the rhetoric from politicians.
In February 2012, Luka's 17-track album, Please Resist Me, was released. The title comes from one of the included poems. It's about colonialism and the unfairness faced by exploited communities in Australia.
Please resist me. Colonize me, compromise me, and conflict me. Please don't risk me. Please call me stupid, because your resistance brings out evolution.
The House